is the mammoth book of thrillers, ghosts and mysteries. And today I'm going to read an Agatha Christie story for you. This is titled The Blue Geranium. Let's begin. When I was down here last year, said Sir Henry Clithering, and stopped. His hostess, Mrs. Bantry, looked at him curiously. The ex-commissioner of Scotland Yard was staying with old friends of his, who lived near St. Mary Mead. Mrs. Bantry, pen in hand, had just asked his advice as to who should be invited to make a sixth guest at dinner that evening. Yes, said Mrs. Bantry, encouragingly, when you were here last year. Tell me, said Sir Henry, do you know a Miss Marple? Mrs. Bantry was surprised. It was the last thing she had expected. No Miss Marple? Who doesn't? The typical old maid of fiction. Quite a dear, but hopelessly behind the times. Do you mean you would like me to ask her to dinner? He was surprised. A little, I must confess. I should hardly have thought you, but perhaps there's an explanation. The explanation is simple enough. When I was down here last year, we got into the habit of discussing unsolved mysteries. There were 5 or 6 of us. Raymond West, the novelist, started it. We each supplied a story to which we knew the answer, but nobody else did. It was supposed to be an exercise in the deductive faculties to see who could get nearest the truth. Well, like in the old story, we hardly realised that Miss Marple was playing, but we were very polite about it, didn't want to hurt the old dear's feelings. And now comes the cream of the jest. The old lady outdid us every time. What? I assure you, straight to the truth, like a homing pigeon. But how extraordinary. Why, dear old Miss Marple has hardly ever been out of St. Mary Mead. But according to her, that has given her unlimited opportunities of observing human nature under the microscope, as it were. I suppose there's something in that, conceded Mrs. Bantry. One would at least know the petty side of people. But I don't think we have any really exciting criminals in our midst. I think we must try her with Arthur's ghost story after dinner. I'd be thankful if she'd find a solution to that. I didn't know that Arthur believed in ghosts. Oh, he doesn't. That's what worries him so. And it happened to a friend of his, George Pritchard. She was capricious, exacting, unreasonable. She complained from morning to night. George was expected to wait on her hand and foot, and everything he did was always wrong, and he got cursed for it. Most men, I'm fully convinced, would have hit her over the head with a hatchet long ago. Eh, Dolly? Isn't that so? She was a dreadful woman, said Mrs. Bantry with conviction. If George Pritchard had brained her with a hatchet, and there had been any woman on the jury, he would have been triumphantly acquitted. I don't quite know how this business started. George was rather vague about it. I gather Mrs. Pritchard had always had a weakness for fortune-tellers, palmists, clairvoyants, anything of that sort. George didn't mind. If she found amusement in it, well and good. But he refused to go into rhapsodies himself, and that was another grievance. A succession of hospital nurses was always passing through the house, Mrs. Pritchard usually becoming dissatisfied with them after a few weeks. One young nurse had been very keen on this fortune-telling stunt, and for a time Mrs. Pritchard had been very fond of her. Then she suddenly fell out with her and insisted on her going. She had back another nurse who had been with her previously, an older woman, experienced and tactful in dealing with a neurotic patient. Nurse Coupling, according to George, was a very good sort, a sensible woman to talk to. She put up with Mrs. Pritchard's tantrums and nerve storms with complete indifference. Mrs. Pritchard always lunched upstairs, and it was usual at lunchtime for George and the nurse to come to some arrangement for the afternoon. Strictly speaking, the nurse went off from 2 to 4, but to oblige, as the phrase goes, she would sometimes take her time off after tea if George wanted to be free for the afternoon. On this occasion, she mentioned that she was going to see a sister at Golders Green, and might be a little late returning. George's face fell, for he had arranged to play a round of golf. Nurse Coupling, however, reassured him. "Will neither of us be missed, Mr. Pritchard?" A twinkle came into her eye. "Mrs. Pritchard's going to have more exciting company than ours." "Who's that?" "Wait a minute." Nurse Coupling's eyes twinkled more than ever. "Let me get it right. Sarita, psychic reader of the future." "Oh, Lord," groaned George. "That's a new one, isn't it?" "Quite new. I believe my predecessor, Nurse Carstairs, sent her along. Mrs. Pritchard hasn't seen her yet. She made me write, fixing an appointment for this afternoon." "Well, at any rate, I shall get my golf," said George, and he went off with the kindliest feelings towards Sarita, the reader of the future. On his return to the house, he found Mrs. Pritchard in a state of great agitation. She was, as usual, lying on her invalid couch, and she had a bottle of smelling salts in her hand, which she sniffed at frequent intervals. "George," she exclaimed, "what did I tell you about this house? The moment I came into it, I felt there was something such things as blue primroses and blue geraniums. But Mrs. Pritchard began to cry and say her days were numbered. Nurse Copling came out with George upon the landing. Of all the silly tomfoolery, he burst out. I suppose it is. Something in the nurse's tone struck him, and he stared at her in amazement. Surely, nurse, you don't believe? No, Mr. Pritchard, I don't believe in reading the future. That's nonsense. What puzzles me is the meaning of this. Fortune tellers are usually out for what they can get, but this woman seems to be frightening Mrs. Pritchard with no advantage to herself. I can't see the point. There's another thing. Yes, Mrs. Pritchard says that something about Zerida was faintly familiar to her. Well, I don't like it, Mr. Pritchard, that's all. I didn't know you were so superstitious, nurse. I'm not superstitious, but I know when a thing is fishy. It was about 4 days later after this that the first incident happened. To explain it to you, I shall have to describe Mrs. Pritchard's room. You'd better let me do that, interrupted Mrs. Bantry. It was papered with one of these new wallpapers, where you apply clumps of flowers to make a kind of herbaceous border. The effect is almost like being in a garden, though of course the flowers are all wrong. I mean, they simply couldn't be in bloom all at the same time. Don't let a passion for horticultural accuracy run away with you, Dolly, said her husband. We all know you're an enthusiastic gardener. Well, it is absurd, protested Mrs. Bantry, to have bluebells and daffodils and lupins and hollyhocks and Michaelmas daisies all grouped together. Most unscientific, said Sir Henry, but to proceed with the story. Well, among these massed flowers were primroses, clumps of yellow and pink, primroses and... Oh, go on, Arthur, this is your story. Colonel Bantry took up the tale. Mrs. Pritchard rang her bell violently one morning. The household came running, thought she was in extremis. Not at all. She was violently excited and pointing at the wallpaper, and there, sure enough, was one blue primrose in the midst of the others. Oh, said Miss Hellier, how creepy. The question was, hadn't the blue primrose always been there? That was George's suggestion and the nurse's, but Mrs. Pritchard wouldn't have it at any price. She had never noticed it till that very morning, and the night before had been full moon. She was very upset about it. I met George Pritchard that same day, and he told me about it, said Mrs. Bantry. I went to see Mrs. Pritchard and did my best to ridicule the whole thing, but without success. I came away really concerned, and I remember I met Jean Instow and told her about it. Jean is a queer girl, she said, so she's really upset about it. I told her that I thought the woman was perfectly capable of dying of fright. She was really abnormally superstitious. I remember Jean rather startled me with what she said next. She said, well, that might be all for the best, mightn't it? And she said it so coolly, in so matter-of-fact a tone, that I was really, well, shocked. Of course I know it's done nowadays to be brutal and outspoken, but I never get used to it. Jean smiled at me rather oddly and said, you don't like my saying that, but it's true. placidly. "One always does. Is Miss Instow a pretty girl? I suppose she plays golf?" "Yes, she's good at all games, and she's nice looking, attractive looking, very fair with a healthy skin and nice steady blue eyes. Of course we always have felt that she and George Pritchard, I mean if things had been different, they are so well suited to one another." "And they were friends?" asked Miss Marple. "Oh yes, great friends." "Do you think, Dolly," said Colonel Bantry plaintively, "that I might be allowed to go on with my story?" "Arthur," said Mrs. Bantry resignedly, "wants to get back to his ghosts." "I had the rest of the story from George himself," went on the Colonel. "There's no doubt that Mrs. Pritchard got the wind up badly towards the end of the next month. She marked off on a calendar the day when the moon would be full, and on that night she had both the nurse and then George into her room and made them study the wallpaper carefully. There were pink hollyhocks and red ones, but there were no blue amongst them. Then when George left the room, she locked the door. And in the morning there was a large blue hollyhock," said Miss Harrier joyfully. "Quite right," said Colonel Bantry, "or at any rate, nearly right. One flower of a hollyhock just above her head had turned blue. It staggered George, and of course the more it staggered him, the more he refused to take the thing seriously. He insisted that the whole thing was some kind of practical joke. He ignored the evidence of the locked door and the fact that Mrs. Pritchard discovered the change before anyone, even Nurse Copling, was admitted. It staggered George, and it made him unreasonable. His wife wanted to leave the house, and he wouldn't let her. He was inclined to believe in the supernatural for the first time, but he wasn't going to admit it. He usually gave in to his wife, but this time he wouldn't. Mary was not to make a fool of herself, he said. The whole thing was the most infernal nonsense. And so the next month sped away. Mrs. Pritchard made less protest than one would have imagined. I think she was superstitious enough to believe that she couldn't escape her fate. She repeated again and again the blue primrose, warning; the blue hollyhock, danger; the blue geranium, death; and she would lie looking at the clump of pinky red geraniums nearest her bed. The whole business was pretty nervy. Even the nurse caught the infection. She came to George 2 days before full moon and begged him to take Mrs. Pritchard away. George was angry. If all the flowers on that damned wall turned into blue devils, it couldn't kill anyone, he shouted. It might. Shock has killed people before now. Nonsense, said George. George has always been a shade big-headed. You can't drive him. I believe he nurse gobbling. She sent George to telephone for the doctor, but it was too late. Mrs. Pritchard, he said, must have been dead at least 8 hours. Her smelling salts lay by her hand on the bed, and on the wall beside her, one of the pinky red geraniums was a bright, deep blue. Horrible, said Miss Elliot with a shiver. Sir Henry was frowning. No additional details. Colonel Bantry shook his head, but Mrs. Bantry spoke quickly. The gas. What about the gas? Asked Sir Henry. When the doctor arrived, there was a slight smell of gas, and sure enough, he found the gas ring in the fireplace very slightly turned on, but so little that it couldn't have mattered. Did Mr. Pritchard and the nurse not notice it when they first went in? The nurse said she did notice a slight smell. George said he didn't notice gas, but something made him feel very queer and overcome. But he put that down to shock, and probably it was. At any rate, there was no question of gas poisoning. The smell was scarcely noticeable. And that's the end of the story. No, it isn't. One way and another, there was a lot of talk. The servants, you see, had overheard things. Had heard, for instance, Mrs. Pritchard telling her husband that he hated her and would jeer if she were dying, and also more recent remarks. She had said one day, apropos of his refusing to leave the house, "Very well, when I am dead, I hope everyone will realise that you have killed me." And as ill luck would have it, he had been mixing some weed killer for the garden paths the very day before. One of the younger servants had seen him and had afterwards seen him taking up a glass of hot milk to his wife. The talk spread and grew. The doctor had given a certificate. I don't know exactly in what terms. Shock, syncope, heart failure. Probably some medical term meaning nothing much. However, the poor lady had not been a month in her grave before an exhumation order was applied for and granted, and the result of the autopsy was nil, I remember, said Sir Henry gravely. A case, for once, of smoke without fire. The whole thing is really very curious, said Mrs. Bantry. That fortune teller, for instance, Sarita, at the address where she was supposed to be, no one had ever heard of such a person. She appeared once, out of the blue, said her husband, and then utterly vanished, out of the blue. That's rather good. And what is more, continued Mrs. Bantry, little nurse Carstairs, who was supposed to have recommended her, had never even heard of her. They looked at each other. It's a mysterious story, said Dr. Lloyd. One can make guesses, but to guess. He shook his head. Has Mr. Pritchard married Miss Instow? Asked Miss Marple in her gentle voice. Now, why do you ask that? Inquired Sir Henry. Miss Marple opened gentle blue eyes. It seems to me so important, she said. Have they married? Colonel Bantry shook his head. We expected something of the kind, but it's been 18 months now. I don't believe they even so much as see each other. That is important, said Miss Marple. Very important. Then you think the same as I do, said Mrs. Bantry. You think? Now, Dolly, said her husband, it's unjustifiable what you're going to say. did such wickedness, she said. No, I was trying to put myself in the place of a certain person. Do you mean George Pritchard? Asked Colonel Bantry. I'll never believe it of George, though, mind you, even the nurse believes it. I went and saw her about a month afterwards, at the time of the exhumation. She didn't know how it was done. In fact, she wouldn't say anything at all, but it was clear enough that she believed George to be in some way responsible for his wife's death. She was convinced of it. Well, said Dr. Lloyd, perhaps she wasn't so far wrong, and mind you, a nurse often knows. She can't say, she's got no proof, but she knows. Sir Henry leant forward. Come now, Miss Marple, he said persuasively. You're lost in a daydream. Won't you tell us all about it? Miss Marple started and turned pink. I beg your pardon, she said. I was just thinking about our district nurse. A most difficult problem. More difficult than the problem of the Blue Geranium. It really depends on the primroses, said Miss Marple. I mean, Mrs. Bantry said they were yellow and pink. If it was a pink primrose that turned blue, of course, that fits in perfectly. But if it happened to be a yellow one... It was a pink one, said Mrs. Bantry. She stirred. They all stared at Miss Marple. Then that seems to settle it, said Miss Marple. She shook her head regretfully. And the wasp season and everything, and of course the gas. It reminds you, I suppose, of countless village tragedies, said Sir Henry. Not tragedies, said Miss Marple, and certainly nothing criminal, but it does remind me a little of the trouble we are having with the district nurse. After all, nurses are human beings, and what with having to be so correct in their behaviour, and wearing those uncomfortable collars, and being so thrown with the family, well, can you wonder that things sometimes happen? A glimmer of light broke upon Sir Henry. You mean Nurse Carstairs? Oh no, not Nurse Carstairs. Nurse Coupling. You see, she had been there before, and very much thrown with Mr. Pritchard, who you say is an attractive man. I dare say she thought, poor thing, well, we needn't go into that. I don't suppose she knew about Miss Instow. Of course the letter really gave her away, didn't it? What letter? Well, she wrote to the fortune-teller at Mrs. Pritchard's request, and the fortune-teller came, apparently, in answer to the letter. But later it was discovered that there never had been such a person at that address, so that shows that Nurse Coupling was in it. She only pretended to write, so what could be more likely that she was the fortune-teller herself? I never saw the point about the letter, said Sir Henry. That's a most important point, of course. Rather a bold step to take, said Miss Marple, because Mrs. Pritchard might have recognised her in spite of the disguise, though of course if she had, the nurse could have pretended it was a joke. What did you mean, said Sir Henry, when you said that if you were a certain person you would not have trusted to fright? One couldn't be sure that way, said Miss Marple. No, I think that the warnings and the blue flowers were, if I may use a military term, she laughed self-consciously, just camouflage. And the real thing? I know, said Miss Marple, apologetically, that I've got wasps on the brain. Poor things destroyed in their thousands, and usually on such a beautiful summer's day. But I remember thinking when I saw the gardener shaking up the cyanide of potassium in a bottle with water, how like smelling salts it looks. And if it were put in a smelling salt bottle and substituted for the real one, well, the poor lady was in the habit of using her smelling salts. Indeed, she said they were found by her hand. Then, of course, while Mr. Pritchard went to telephone said Sir Henry. What worries me, said Miss Marple, is poor Mr. Pritchard and that nice girl, Miss Inchter.